Welcome back to Hollow Street. For those of you just joining us, this isn't your average town. Things here, they don't always make sense. Tonight, we're tuning into a story that proves just how thin the veil between now and then can be. It's about a teenager, a dusty old television, and a channel that shouldn't exist. Our story begins with Leo, a 17-year-old who, like most teens in Hollow Street, was perpetually bored. His summer was a slow crawl of odd jobs and endlessly scrolling on his phone. One sweltering afternoon, his grandmother asked him to clear out the attic. It was a dusty treasure trove of forgotten things, a museum of his family's past. Tucked away under a yellowed sheet was a relic, a chunky, wood-paneled television from the 70s, complete with rabbit ear antennas. Driven by a mix of curiosity and a desire to procrastinate, Leo hauled the heavy set down to his room. He fiddled with the knobs, plugged it in, and after a concerning flicker and a hum, the screen sputtered to life. He turned the clunky dial, cycling through channels. It was mostly static, a blizzard of black and white. But then, as he twisted the dial past channel 12, just before it looped back to 2, he felt a strange, soft click. The static coalesced, sharpening into an image. It was a street, a very familiar street. It was Hollow Street. Leo leaned closer. The picture was black and white, grainy, like an old film. He recognized the gnarled oak tree Acido's own house. Mrs. Gable's prize-winning roses next door. The distinct crack in the pavement he'd tripped over 1,000 times. But something was off. The cars parked along the curb were vintage models from the 50s. The mailman, frozen in the frame, wore a uniform Leo had only seen in history books. In the top right corner of the screen, a small, digital clock read 1:13 p.m. The image was completely still, a photograph broadcasted as a video. He checked his phone. It was 3:45 p.m. He thought it was just a local history program. Maybe a glitch. He turned the TV off and on again. Static. He carefully turned the dial back to that liminal space between the last channel and the first. Click. There it was again. The same frozen scene of Hollow Street, time-stamped at 1:13 p.m. He left it on, hoping it would eventually change, but it never did. It was just a single, unmoving frame. The next day, he tried again. He turned the dial, found the hidden channel, and the screen resolved. But it wasn't the 1950s anymore. The image was now in faded, washed-out color. The cars were different, boxier, models from the 1970s. The trees were taller, fuller, but it was undeniably Hollow Street. The timestamp remained, 1:13 p.m. Again, the image was static, a silent, unblinking window into a different era. This became Leo's secret obsession. Every day, he'd rush to the old TV and tune into the secret channel. Every day, it showed him a different Hollow Street. He saw the 1980s, with big hair and neon clothes visible on a passerby, frozen mid-stride. He saw the 1990s, the familiar look of his own childhood, but still years before he was born. He even saw a sepia-toned version from what looked like the early 1900s, with horse-drawn carts on the unpaved road. Each broadcast was a perfect, still photograph of his street from a different decade. But two things were always the same. It was always Hollow Street, and the time was always 1:13 p.m. It was unsettling. Why that specific time? What was so important about 1:13 in the afternoon? It felt less like a broadcast and more like a collection of captured moments, a gallery of seconds stolen from time. Leo started a journal, documenting each day's broadcast. He'd sketch the cars, note the fashion, and describe the subtle changes to the houses. The channel never showed the future, only the past. It was a one-way mirror. He started to feel like a ghost. Haunting the history of his own home, he began to notice details. The Gables house didn't have its extension in the 70s. The big oak tree was just a sapling in the 1950s broadcast. 1 week into his discovery, he turned on the TV, his heart thumping with anticipation. He tuned to the channel. The image that appeared made him drop the remote. It was from his time, Today, he recognized the exact arrangement of cars, the recycling bin his dad had forgotten to bring in, even the smudge on his own bedroom window. And there, standing on the sidewalk, was a figure, a boy, looking up at a house. It was him. Frozen, he was looking at a still image of himself from earlier that day. He glanced at the timestamp, 1:13 p.m. He frantically tried to remember what he was doing at 1:13. He'd been in the kitchen, making a sandwich. He was sure of it, but the TV was showing him outside, staring at his house. A cold dread washed over him. The channel wasn't just showing the past. It was showing a past, but whose? Was it reality? Or was it showing him what could have been? The implications were dizzying. If the channel showed him somewhere he wasn't, what did that mean for all the other images? Were they true snapshots of time? Or were they alternate versions of Hollow Street, moments that almost happened? The static channel was no longer a curious quirk, it was a profound and terrifying mystery. Driven by a new urgency, Leo decided to test it. The next day, he set an alarm for 1:10 p.m. When it rang, he sprinted outside and stood on the exact spot where the TV had shown him. He looked up at his window, mimicking the pose from the photograph. He held his breath, counting the seconds. 1:11, 1:12. At exactly 1:13 p.m., he felt nothing. The sun was warm, a car drove by. The world didn't stop. Disappointed and confused, he went back inside and up to his room. He turned on the TV, his hands shaking slightly as he tuned to the channel. The static cleared. The image was from today. It showed Hollow Street at 1:13 p.m., but he wasn't in it. The spot where he had been standing was empty. It was then that Leo understood. The channel didn't capture what happened. It captured what asterisk was supposed asterisk to happen, or perhaps what happened in another version of his town. The channel was a window, not into his past, but into a parallel Hollow Street, one that branched away every single day at 1:13 p.m. For decades, at that exact moment, time was splitting, and this old television was the only thing that could pick up the echo of the other side. Leo sat there, staring at the empty sidewalk on the screen. He thought about all the images he'd seen. The mailman from the 50s, the family from the 80s, the horse and cart from the 1900s. Were they all ghosts from another timeline? Were they living out lives in a world almost identical to his, separated by a single, inexplicable moment each day? He never knew what was special about 1:13 p.m. Maybe it was the moment the old TV was first unplugged, or the time of a forgotten accident. The reason was lost to the static. Leo kept the television, but he used it less and less. The weight of knowing about that other Hollow Street, so close and yet so impossibly far, was too much. Sometimes, late at night, he'd turn it on, just to see which ear he'd get. It was a lonely vigil, a quiet acknowledgement of the infinite possibilities hidden in a single moment, on a single street, in our strange little town. Thanks for tuning into another tale from Hollow Street. The world is full of strange signals if you just know how to find them. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next visit. Until then, stay curious.